In this video, we're going to look at the physical features of Kenilworth Castle between 1120 and 1266. You're going to need to take some notes and answer some questions, so just make sure you've got a pen and some paper with you before we get started. Before we look at the physical features this video is going to focus on, I want you just to write down as much as you can remember about Kenilworth at this time. So why was it built in the first place, which different people owned the castle, and what was it used for during this time? You can pause the video, jot down some notes, and then we'll continue. I'm sure you've said we could describe this period of Kenilworth's history as being military. What we mean by this is the most important reason it was built was for military purposes: control, power, even potential battle. Kenilworth is just one of hundreds of castles built all over England following William of Normandy's conquest in 1066. They're built to control this new country being taken over by the Normans. Now, this castle in particular is built because of the worries that King Henry I had about the loyalty of one of his earls, the Earl of Warwick. To control the situation, Henry grants land nearby to his mate, Geoffrey de Clinton, and gives him support to build Kenilworth Castle. Basically saying, keep an eye on this Earl of Warwick, and he's trying to keep balance of control and power in this part of England. In 1174, the castle is taken into royal control and is used by Henry II and then his son John I to try to keep control in the face of a number of serious threats to their power. After this, the castle is handed on to Simon de Montfort. In this video, we're going to focus on the building developments made by Geoffrey I and then under Kings Henry II and John I. After this video, you're going to be able to explain 6 major features of the castle that were developed at this time. What are they? Who built them? And why? We're going to start with the Great Tower. Now, this type of building is known as a keep. This is the major tower of any Norman castle. The building of this stone keep at Kenilworth begins directly after 1124, when Geoffrey de Clinton had built the initial wooden buildings of the castle. Although what we see today is of course just a ruin, this was a hugely impressive structure at the time, and one that wouldn't have been possible to build without the support of Henry I. This is a defensively very strong centre of the castle, ready for any potential battle, but it would also have been used as a place of residence. Now, this is the part of the building constructed in the 1120s. The floor above is actually added by King John 80 years later. We can also see in these windows a great example of how Kenilworth was adapted across hundreds of years. This style of window was introduced by Robert Dudley in the 16th century. It shows how parts of Kenilworth were changed over time, depending on the fashion of the time, as well as what the castle was being used for. Next, we're going to look at 2 other key features of the 1120s, the causeway and the mere. Now, this picture actually depicts the castle as it was 450 years later, but we're going to use it to explore these 2 features. Both of these features are primarily defensive. They strengthen the castle's power. The causeway, constructed in the 1120s, it helps to create a dam, which then holds back a lake, known as the mere. This mere is one of the largest man-made water defences in Britain. It makes the castle pretty hard to attack. The mere was extended by King John in 1210. In fact, he makes it over half a mile long. We also know the mere was used for fishing, a valuable part of the diet for those at the castle. Historians need to use lots of different sources to work out what was built when. It's one of the challenges of studying a castle like Kenilworth. One of the ways we can be sure the mere was created in the first years of the castle is actually thanks to a fishing permit from 1125. Let's pause the video for a moment and complete this activity. Once you're done, you can continue playing the video. Okay, we're now going to jump to 1174, and the castle is taken into royal control by Henry II. He and his son John I carried out major building works to strengthen the castle's defence. This can show us how worried they were about threats they faced. In particular, we're going to focus on this guy, John I. When it comes to Kenilworth, he really splashes the cash. He spends a huge sum of £1,100. He's a very unpopular king, a reputation for high taxes, spending money on himself. You may have seen him and know him from this Disney film Robin Hood, where he is depicted as this unpopular lion. Now, some historians debate whether he was really that bad. However, most agree he's a pretty terrible king, very unpopular. To try to strengthen his power, he made big developments to several key castles. At Kenilworth, major developments took place under his rule. In this image, we can see a reconstruction of what Kenilworth may have looked like after John's improvements. Let's focus on the outer curtain wall, Mortimer's Tower, and Lund's Tower. Okay, first of all, this outer curtain wall creates a powerful surrounding for the castle. It now meant that there were two major walls, the inner and outer curtain. This would be incredibly intimidating for any potential attacker. It shows us, though, how concerned King John was. Mortimer's Tower is the new entrance to the castle under King John. It consisted of two towers that were strengthened to try to protect what is the weakest point of any castle. As we can see in this picture, Mortimer's Tower is at the end of the causeway. Here we can see what it looks like today, in ruins. But at the time, this is a much more impressive and imposing entrance. It had a portcullis, a heavy sliding gate that could be dropped to add a further line of defence. Today, you can still see the grooves used to secure the portcullis. The final building we're going to look at is Lund's Tower. This was part of the outer curtain wall. It's significant to us because it is the best preserved wall tower. Many of the others have been completely destroyed. We can see that towers like this added to the castle's defensive strength. It had two upper floors, with the top one giving access to the wall walk, where soldiers could walk all around the castle on top of the outer wall. We can also see the arrow loops, which were built into the towers at this time. In this picture, we can see what it looks like today, and we can see from the outside and here from the inside. These are the arrow loops. Easy to shoot out of, almost impossible to shoot into. King John, obviously a big fan of these. Like I said previously, this top floor of the Great Tower was built by him, and we can see this type of arrow loop here as well. The type of arrow loop at Kenilworth, these are known as fish-tailed arrow loops. They look kind of like a fish, kind of. Now, all these developments made by King John, they represent the most expensive and developed military building techniques of the time. They can tell us a lot about King John's fears. In turn, they also show us what the attitude of many powerful people in England was towards King John at the time. He wasn't just doing all this building work for nothing. So, we've now reached the end of looking through the physical features, and there are two tasks for you to do. Firstly, I want you to pause the video and answer this question. When you're done, you can unpause and look at the final thing we're going to do. Okay, finally, you're going to complete an exam-style question. So let's have a look. It says, choose one period in your site's history. We're going to choose the military period that we've been looking at in this video. It says, explain how your site is significant in helping us to understand everyday life and attitudes at that time. Use physical features of the site as well as your knowledge to support your answer. So let's look at a few key points of the question here. Firstly, significant. This means we have to explain how important and useful Kenilworth is for our understanding. We're trying to understand life and attitudes. This means what's going on in England at the time. Who is in power? How strong is their power? And attitudes. What attitudes did people have? What are their priorities? What are their worries? What are their hopes? This can mean the attitude of the people in power, as well as the wider population. Finally, we're going to have to talk about the physical features. So those are what we've looked at today. You need to link those to this idea of life and attitudes at the time. Here is some guidance for what you should put in each paragraph. The question should take you around 25 minutes. Good luck.